And for eyewitness insights about the situation in Venezuela, we're speaking to Canadian Dr. Timothy Baud. He recently traveled to Venezuela with a delegation. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
How was your experience in Venezuela with the delegation?
We had a very interesting time. We spent about 10 days. We traveled not only in Caracas, but also we went to the southwest, to Barquisimeto. We met with community leaders. We met with hospital workers. We met with people on a farming cooperative. So I think we got a pretty good sense of how the sanctions were affecting Venezuelans.
Yeah, and exactly to that point, how would you describe the situation on the ground in Venezuela as opposed to how things are portrayed in the media?
Well, it's a bit like George Orwell's book 1984. It's completely different than what the impression we get from the media here in Canada. We have a Canadian broadcasting system, the CBC. It produces the same news that you will see on CNN, Fox News, the BBC. Completely absurd things like people are starving in the streets. People have no food at all to eat. That there's no support for the government. That the government is fraudulent, and on and on. Completely opposite to what the situation is.
Yeah, and lastly, as a doctor, and as someone that has been to Venezuela just recently, can you discuss the impact the U.S. sanctions have had on access to medical supplies in Venezuela?
I spoke to individuals, people who have diabetes, and they were having trouble getting medication for the diabetes. It's inspiring, though, to see how well the hospitals and the medical workers are standing up despite the hardships, including the recent electrical blackout, which caused so much trouble. But yes, people are suffering from lack of medications, but I'm sure that the people of Venezuela and the government of Venezuela will overcome this.
Doctor, lastly, the foreign policy of Trudeau's government has not varied so much from the policy of the Trump administration. Are Canadian citizens buying this anti-Venezuela narrative?
I think that there's a lot of skepticism. It's a narrative that is so hypocritical. For example, when you see what's happening in Honduras, or the fraudulent elections in Haiti, or the Canadian support for the government of Saudi Arabia, people look at that and they say, you mean that is okay, yet somehow Venezuela, there's something terribly wrong there? I think a lot of people aren't buying it, but you can't underestimate the overwhelming presence of disinformation that we're getting, not only on mainstream media, but also on social media.
Dr. Timothy Baud, we thank you so much for your time for Telesur English. We have been speaking with Dr. Timothy Baud. He recently traveled to Venezuela with a delegation.